Thursday is Thanksgiving.
Yes. Grammy's fried.
I am fried, I'm telling you.
I know. You look cute fried.
There we go. Hello.
Hi.
Good evening. I get my volume up here. Okay. Good. By the way, if anybody, first of all, good evening. If you want to just see the speaker on top right of your Zoom, you see it says speaker view or gallery view. And you can change it to just see the speaker, the person who's speaking, or if you want to see everybody, you can switch it either way. Okay. Everyone here?
I think
Good.
so.
Excellent. If you're not here, raise your hand.
Uh,
I guess everyone's here. Good. Okay. So good evening and welcome to lesson 3 in Secrets of the Bible, story of Yaakov and Esau. I've had a pretty exciting last few days, as some of you had morning inspiration today. The Saturday night, they advertised a 20-hour Farbrengen for the conference of Shluchim, a Zoom Farbrengen.
I'd rather hear the speaker.
This Farbrengen began Saturday night. As soon as Australia and New Zealand finished Shabbos, the Farbrengen began. And as it went through all the time zones, the different Chabad rabbi, different shluchim came onto the Zoom. Long story short, the Zoom is still going on. From Saturday night, New Zealand time, it's about 90 or so, 95 hours straight. It's the longest Zoom ever in Zoom history. The previous record was 24 hours. And there's constantly 700, 800, 900 shluchim on the Zoom. And it's amazing. I went to sleep last night with headphones in, watching the Farbrengen. I fell asleep. I woke up this morning, put the headphones in, and it was just continued. Yeah, from the Australian shluchim to Israeli shluchim to American shluchim, just everybody together. It's really, really inspiring. At the same time, we got to get some work done. So it was difficult to to get off that and prepare for the class and do what we have to do. Take the kids. Actually, on the way to school, I watched it too. On the way to school, on the way back from school, it was all one big Farbrengen, and I think they're going to have to stop the Farbrengen by Shabbos. I believe this Farbrengen is going to go for a whole week, straight till Shabbos, and perhaps even begin after that. So, continue. So this is our Farbrengen. We're Farbrengen here in Santa Clarita. While we're learning the stories, the secrets of the Bible. And actually, today is going to be a little bit different than the past 2 weeks. We're going to get really Kabbalistic. We're going to go Kabbalistic today. We're going to learn a very deep concept in Jewish mysticism based on the Zohar and Kabbalah and Hasidus, and we're going to tie it into the story of Yaakov and Esau, which is actually this week's Torah portion. So it's not a coincidence, it's divine providence that we're learning this class this week as we are learning it. We're going to be reading it on Saturday in the Torah. So like last week, the past 2 weeks, we're going to discuss the story. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to hear the story, go through the verses in the Torah because everything is based back in the actual Torah in the book. And we will ask questions, try to delve deeper into the story. It's a story that many of us heard, most of us heard. Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esau, the blessings, the Isaac and Rebekah. And we'll try to take apart the story. Then we're going to study a very deep Kabbalistic idea, and then we're going to allow that to answer the questions from this portion, from this story. Okay, so I'm gonna move this here because that's where your faces are here. So we're going to start this actually today. Unlike the past 2 weeks, there are 3 parts to the story. So we're going to start with the narration of part 1. We'll discuss it. We'll go to part 2, we'll discuss it, and then we're going to go to part 3. We'll break apart the story. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen as we... Okay. I'm guessing you see my screen. I don't see you now, so even if you raise your hands, I wouldn't know. I'll take it for granted you do. There we go. Okay, so story 3, Yaakov and Esau, Jacob and Esau.
After many years of barrenness, Isaac and Rebekah's prayers are answered, and Rebekah conceives. But this is no ordinary pregnancy.
The children struggled within her, and she said, "If so, why am I thus?" And she went to inquire of God. God said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two kingdoms from your insides will diverge. Kingdom will overpower kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger." Her days to give birth were fulfilled, and behold, there were twins in her womb. The first one came out ruddy, his entirety as a hairy mantle, and they called his name Esau. After that, his brother came out, and his hand was grasping Esau's heel, and he called his name Jacob. The lads grew up. Esau was a man who knows game, a man of the field, and Jacob was a wholesome man, a dweller of tents. Isaac loved Esau for the game in his mouth, and Rebekah loved Jacob.
Okay. So that's the part number 1 to the story of Yaakov and Esau. So from the very start of this story, we have a bit of a paradox here. On the one hand, Yaakov and Esau are twins, which implies a certain level of symmetry. And we find that Yishmael and Yitzchak are not twins, right? Yitzchak and Yishmael are not only twins, they're not even the same mother. But Yaakov and Esau, for some reason, Hashem creates them as twins. But on the other hand, they differ in almost every way. We know the physical appearance, the Torah tells us, like you see in text number 1, they are look different, and their character is different, as we'll see. Their behavior is different. So even before they're born, there is a battle going on in the womb of Rivka. And she is told by God, or an angel, that she came to inquire, why is this struggle? There's a struggle going on in my womb. And she was told the answer is because you have womb mates. Okay, get that? So what's the struggle? She's told as follows. Look at 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 kingdoms from your insides will diverge. Kingdom will overpower kingdom, and the elder will serve the younger. That's what she is told. In other words, Rivka is told that yes, there is a struggle going on within you, but it's not just sibling rivalry. It's not just 2 fetuses not getting along. It's a cosmic struggle between 2 nations, between 2 kingdoms, as he calls it. And this struggle will continue for generations, and indeed for most of history. And she's told kingdom will overpower kingdom, one rise, one will fall, but ultimately, one will be superior over the other. The younger over the older, right? So this is the struggle that she is told. So what happens? Esau is born first. You see in text 1. Esau is born first. And it comes out, and what's happening? Yaakov is following him and holding onto his
Heel.
The word Yaakov, Jacob, means heel. He was holding onto the heel of Esau, seemingly trying to stop him from coming out first. He wanted to come out first. There's a whole commentary there. He wanted to be the firstborn. So this is the birth of Yaakov and Esau. And the difference between Yaakov and Esau become more apparent as they grow up. It says Esau is a man of the field. He's a hunter. He knows game. While Yaakov is a ishtam yoshev ahalim. He's a man, it's a wholesome man, a complete man, a dweller of tents. Okay. Now, not only are Yaakov, Jacob, and Esau different, but it involves their parents too. Yitzchak, Isaac, and Rivka have different attitudes when it comes to their children. Like we learn here at the end of text 1, Isaac loved Esau for the game in his mouth, and Rebekah loved Jacob. Okay? Now, so it tells us why Isaac loved Esau. It says clearly, for the game in his mouth. Why Rebekah loved Jacob, we don't know. It doesn't say, right? We can imagine, we can guess, Jacob is a dweller of tents. As the sages say, means he was in the tent studying, he was learning. Which mother wouldn't prefer a child to be a nice mensch, a clean-cut, studious scholar, going through medical school, as opposed to a man of the field, someone who's a hunter? Very possible Rivka also was acting on the prophecy she was told, that the elder will serve the younger. So perhaps that's why she loved Yaakov. But Yitzchak, Isaac's preference for Esau, it says clearly, the game in his mouth. Now that doesn't make sense. That's very hard to understand. What's the game in his mouth? So Rashi has two explanations. One is literal, simple. Esau was a hunter. Hunter brings home a good steak, a good barbecue. That's the game in his mouth. Another explanation is that Esau had a good mouth, he had a good tongue. He was able to fool his father Yaakov. But it seems a little odd that Yitzchak likes his son because he brings him home a good steak. We're talking about Isaac, we're talking about, one of our patriarchs, right? So before we go to the next part, anybody have questions on this part number 1? Aside from the question I asked about why does Isaac love Esau just because he has game in his mouth? Any other questions before we go further?
I just have one. I just have a quick one. Can you break down where heel comes in out of the word Yaakov?
Yeah, the word Yaakov comes from the word Akev.
Akev.
Yud Ayin Kov Vet. If you drop the first letter, Yaakov, it's Akev.
Akev.
Akev, yeah. And it says he was holding onto the Akev of Esau. It uses that word.
And it's also a verb. Yaakov means a follower. That's how we know he came second. Yaakov, to follow.
Follow, yeah. Herman?
Is there any relevance as to really even up to our current day, through all of human mankind, the difference between a man and a woman with regards to just the simplicity and what the essence of many men are? They were hunters. They were they could do tasks. They couldn't maintain a household, that's for sure.
Right.
Is there any relevance at all as to Hashem has made us man and woman? I mean,
yes, it definitely is. It definitely is. I'd like to put that aside in the meantime. Maybe we'll get to it at the end because we're going to contrast Isaac and Rebekah. So it'll come in there. Okay? In that part of the story, we'll contrast the idea of Isaac and Rebekah. Okay. So we're going to go on to text number 2, second part of the story. But we have 5 questions that we'll ask after text 2. So text 2 will continue the story. I'll share my screen. Okay. So this is the reason why they love each other.
It came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were dimmed of sight, and he called his elder son Esau, and he said to him, "Here, please, I have grown old. I do not know the day of my death. Now, please pick up your implement, your sword and your bow, and go out to the field and trap game for me. Make for me delicious food such as I love, and bring it to me, and I will eat, in order that my soul should bless you before I die." Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau, and Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Listen to my voice, to that which I am commanding you. Go now to the flock and take for me from there 2 goodly goat kids, and I will prepare them as delicious food for your father, such as he loves. You will bring to your father, and he will eat, in order that he should bless you before his death." Jacob said to his mother Rebekah, "Here, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I will be in his eyes as a trickster, and I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing." And his mother said to him, "Your curse is upon me, my son. Only listen to my voice and go take for me." Rebekah took the desirable garments of her elder son Esau, and she dressed her younger son Jacob. And she dressed the goat kid skins on his hands and upon the smoothness of his neck. He came to his father, and he said, "Who are you, my son?" And Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn." Isaac said to Jacob, "Please approach, and I will feel you, my son. Are you this, my son, Esau, or not?" Jacob approached his father Isaac, and he felt him, and he said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, and the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were as the hands of his brother Esau, hairy, and he blessed him. "God shall give to you of the dew of the heavens, and the fat of the earth, and an abundance of grain and wine. Nations will serve you, and kingdoms will bow to you. You shall be a master over your brothers, and your mother's son shall bow to you. Those who curse you shall be cursed, and those who bless you shall be blessed."
Okay, very good. So we have here, we review these incidents in the Torah between Yaakov and Esau, and I think it's time to get to the questions now. Questions, we'll focus on 5 questions as the class goes on. We'll probably might ask a few more questions, and we'll see when we get to the soul of the story, the questions will all fall into place. The story will make sense. So we're going to focus on 5, even though there are many, many more questions, but due to time constraints, we'll focus on 5. So question number 1. Rivka is told that there are going to be 2 kingdoms are going to come from her, right? And these 2 kingdoms will constantly be struggling with each other. What are these 2 kingdoms? Who are they? And what are they fighting over? What are they constantly fighting over? I'll ask a follow-up to this question. Why is it that when Rivka finds out, she's complaining, right? She says, "Oi, there's something going on in my womb, my stomach, I can't handle it." And she's told there's going to be 2 nations, right? 2 kingdoms. And they're going to constantly be in conflict with one another. And what happens? She's fine. Okay, that's it. How did that make her feel better? I think that would make her feel worse. I mean, if you tell a mother that, "Oh, you just have stomach pains, or you have this or that, you know, it's something wrong with the womb and at the moment," okay, get over it. But she's told that her 2 kids are going to be fighting for eternity, and that's it. That makes her feel better? That doesn't make sense. Why she just walk away without complaining further? Next question. If Yaakov was destined to become the firstborn, and as the prophecy of the master, why wasn't he born first? You may not have had this question when you first studied the story, but what the commentaries ask, why create an upside down situation? Yaakov is holding on to the heel, right? He wants to come out first. Esau has to come out first, but the younger one has to overcome and gain the top position over Esau. No, question number 3. Why did Isaac favor Esau? What is this all about? What does it say? The trap or food in his mouth. And was Isaac really so easily fooled? He didn't know his son. Rivka knew who Isaac was, but Jacob didn't. I mean, the Torah tells us that his eyesight were going, but what does eyesight have to do with not knowing which one of your children are moral and which one isn't? Especially as we say, Esau wasn't just a hunter, but he was a rapist, he was a murderer, he was steal, Isaac didn't know just because his eyesight was going?
Well, there is an expression when you say, I see, it means I get it, I understand. So Rivka could see things, get it, that Isaac didn't, about the characters of their sons.
So you're saying Isaac didn't know the character of his son?
Right.
It seems a little far-fetched to say that Isaac didn't know who Esau was and who Jacob was.
No, he knew who they were, but to become continuing the lineage of the Jewish nation, you got to be someone special to have that kind of leadership qualities.
So we're saying right. So we're saying that Isaac thought that Esau was more qualified.
He thought that he was okay for the role, but he wasn't.
Right. So that's the question. So we're saying Isaac wasn't in touch with reality with his children.
No, that's not right, Rabbi.
Okay.
I agree with Naomi to some extent. He may not have known his 2 children as well as the mother who gave birth. So that's an important concept because mothers do know. And 2, I'm going to go back to the essence, maybe to Isaac's ego with regards to just being a man. And there is a huge difference between men and women. And
I get it. I get it, but
that comes into play. And there's a lot of other questions that.
Yeah.
Rabbi, the blessing that Isaac gave over Jacob doesn't seem like that blessing would have fit Esau. Or do you think he would have done a different blessing for Esau? Because I mean,
very good. We'll soon see how the blessings also come into play. The types of blessings that they got are different. And I'd say it's very difficult if 2 children are somewhat similar, but they have subtle differences. There's no question that the mother has more of an intuition on the children. But if one is a rapist, murderer, a horrible individual, the other one is a pious, righteous tzaddik, and the father doesn't know the difference. The father doesn't know which one should be a continuation to continue the legacy of Abraham, the blessings of the Jewish people, inherit the land of Israel, etc., etc. It seems a little far-fetched, especially since we're talking about Isaac, who was such a pious man. And we know that he studied with his son Jacob. When it says each Yeshiv Yeholim was sitting in the tents, he was studying with his father. Whilst Esau, Yaakov, what does he want from him? He wants food. He even says clearly he loved him because he was a man of the hunter. I mean, it definitely begs the question, especially when it comes to Isaac, why is Isaac willing to give away the blessing to Esau? And we must say that he knows Esau and Yaakov are different, that Yaakov is the pious one and Jacob is the hunter. What is it that he found in Jacob, in Esau, that he wanted to convey this blessing?
Rabbi,
yeah,
where does the concept of blessing come from? I mean, previously Abraham didn't bless Yitzchak. I mean, why is this like a center part of the of this story?
Yes, he did.
This is about to die.
Abraham blessed Yitzchak. Actually, Hashem blesses Yitzchak with the blessing of Abraham. Hashem says that Yitzchak Yikar Chazara, that everything I promised you will be in continuation through your son Isaac. Hashem doesn't tell Isaac which child will be the continuation of the blessing of Abraham, so he gives it to him. So Isaac has to give that blessing to one of them.
I have another
Later
question.
on, Jacob gives the blessing, divides that blessing between all his 12 children.
I have another question, Rabbi. How do we know that Isaac really didn't know who actually came before him?
Who came before him?
No, not came before him, but how do we know that Isaac didn't really know that Jacob was Jacob?
Oh, he must have known. He must have known. And that begs the question, if he knew, why does he want to give this blessing to Esau over Jacob? Right.
He gave, if he knew, then he gave the blessing to Jacob.
But he originally wanted to give it to Esau. So the
Because
question,
he's the firstborn. It's his birthright.
but you're giving the blessing of Abraham to, that means the Jewish people, the forefathers of the Jewish people would have been Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. How do you like that? He must have known that Jacob is more capable of carrying the tradition of Abraham and Isaac.
So
And
maybe he wanted them to work harder.
Okay, good.
What about massive denial on the part of Yitzchak? After all, when you watch on TV, when someone commits a murder and they interview the family relatives, they all say what a wonderful human being he is. He couldn't possibly have done it. Could this have been massive denial?
Not by Isaac, no. Number one, we would know that the Torah is not shy in telling us people's flaws, even our ancestors, our patriarchs, and the biblical figures. And seemingly, this is the way it was going to happen. It should have happened. Isaac wanted to give it to Esau for a reason, and there's a reason why Jacob got it. We'll soon see why. But let's take this question a step further, is why if Rivka knew that Jacob is more capable of getting the blessings and continuing the legacy of Abraham, why doesn't she tell Yaakov? And why go through trickery, through a deception in order to get the blessing? As I said one day this week, Rivka should have done like your average Jewish wife. Tell your husband he's wrong.
Right. That's not going to work.
Tell him he's wrong. Tell him.
What about the husband's ego?
Teach him why he's wrong. Yitzchak.
Didn't the whole thing start off wrong? Where parents, they each had different favorites.
No way.
They violated and chose a favorite, and they,
Right. The question is. So the question is, yes, they had a favorite. The question is, how can Esau be the favorite of Yitzchak? Yitzchak should know.
Yeah.
Very difficult to say. Well, he's just human, so that was one of his failings. We're talking about Yitzchak. We're talking about
Where in the narrative does it say that Esau was a rapist and a thief and all these? Just because he's a hunter doesn't necessarily mean he was an evil person. Am I missing something?
Yes, yeah. No, you're not missing anything in the Torah. In the verse itself, it doesn't say he was a rapist. This is the Medrash, Rashi, the commentaries discuss that. What kind of character Esau
But
was.
he married the Hittite women, two non-Jewish women.
Yeah, that's right.
He definitely went against his parents' wishes.
Yeah.
The wives that he took. He wasn't a bundle of nachas. Let's put it that way.
He married a shiksa.
Two of them.
Okay.
There were no shiksas.
Well, right. At that time, it wasn't a concept of marrying out of the religion, but there was definitely the women that he married was not in agreement. His parents didn't agree with him. But what else is new? Which how many parents don't agree with their children's choices? Let's go on and answer. Let's start with question one before we get into the deep Kabbalistic ideas of this lesson, let's just start with the two kingdoms. So Rebecca received these prophecies about two kingdoms, they'll be fighting, etc., etc. So it's obvious that the story is not just about two people, Yaakov and Esau. It relates to larger historical.
Hello?
This duality.
Hi, Joe, I'm doing a Bible study now. Can I call you later?
Bible?
Yeah, sure. Anytime. So the sages discuss these various aspects to this duality between Yaakov and Esau. And it exists on many different levels. Let's discuss this Jacob-Esau duality on a few different levels. And we'll start with the historical level. The historical level, there's a historical conflict between Jacob, and Esau. Who are the descendants of Jacob?
Descendants of
Jewish
Jacob.
people.
Joseph.
You guys.
Joseph.
Joseph.
My buddy Joseph.
Joseph.
All the tribes come from
Jason, yeah.
Judea.
Right.
Judea comes from Jacob. Who comes from Esau?
The Arabs.
Muhammad.
They come from Ishmael.
Yeah.
Esau fathered the nation of Edom, which is the culture and the power of Rome. Okay? So this is, according to the historical meaning of the two nations and kingdoms and the prophecy of Rivka, it is a reference to the great nations of Judea and of Rome. And we know 2,000 years ago, these two nations clashed in a very bloody conflict that lasted for centuries. It was the first century BCE. It's not before the Corona era. The Romans gained control over Eretz Yisrael, over the lands of Israel, which ended a Jewish independence, which started in we were coming up to Hanukkah, the Hashmonaim kingdom, right? And the Jews rebelled here and there, but ultimately they were crushed. The Holy Temple was destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed, and the Jewish people went into exile. This is the conflict between Rome and Judea. Now you would think, if that's the case, what about the prophecy that the younger one will rule the older one, right? Seems like Rome really had upper hand over Judea, over the Jewish people. Esau is winning the struggle, has won the struggle over Jacob. Well, it may have seemed like that then, but look at us later on, 2,000 years later. We have a tiny nation, right? We're homeless for most of our history. And the other side, we had Rome, a powerful empire, which was controlled the Western civilization. And today, like I say, where's Rome? Where's the powerful Roman Empire? Right? It's in the book of the pages of Wikipedia. Right? Where are the Jewish people? We're here. We're here today. Right? We're still a formidable presence in the world. So, whilst there are times, it says there'll be a struggle where Esau will be over Yaakov, but ultimately Yaakov will prevail and will rule over Esau. So that's the historical influence of historical conflict of Rome and Judea, of Yaakov and Esau. Now, if you look in your book on page 84, if you don't have a book, it's fine. I'll just read it from my book. So you have the questions for discussion here. What influences of historical Rome can you identify in American society today? Right? What kind of influences of historical Rome can you find today? You have quest for power, luxury, love of luxury, the bigger the better attitude. The body is all what it's all about. You have the skyscrapers and the mansions and the monuments and art and architecture. You have technology, entertainment. There's so much that we get from Rome, the effect and the influence of Rome that is with us today. How about examples of Jewish influence in the world?
Christianity,
Right, yeah,
Judeo-Christian.
Right, but we share.
Well, our morals, our
right,
our mores.
The belief in God. You have
Laws.
Morality, generosity, what?
Laws.
Love, right? Social
Laws.
justice.
LAWS.
Laws, very good. Yeah, laws. You have responsibilities, pursuit of peace. These are all things that you find in Judea. Okay, so that'll lead us into the next level of interpretation between the conflict between Yaakov and Esau. On a deeper level, Yaakov and Esau are more than just two nations. It's more than just Rome and Judea. They embody two worldviews, two approaches to life. Right?
Mhm.
As we see in I'm going to go back to the words. He says, Hakel kol Yaakov, Jacob tells, Isaac tells Jacob, Hakel kol Yaakov, the voice is the voice of Jacob, Esau, and the hands are the hands of Esau. The plain meaning of the verse is that Yitzchak, Isaac, is confused, right? There's a disguise. He's wearing Esau's clothing, but his voice is like Yaakov. But the sages see a deeper meaning here. This is Medrash, text 3, page 85. Two legacies did Isaac bequeath to his two sons. To Jacob he gave the voice. As it is written, the voice is the voice of Jacob. And to Esau he gave the hands. As it is written, and the hands are the hands of Esau. Okay, so the Medrash says that there are two dimensions to a created existence. There's the spirit, the voice, and there's the matter, the hands. In human life, we have both worlds. We straddle both worlds, the worlds of ideas and the worlds of actions, right? And this duality results in two perspectives in life. So one perspective is the material. The material is real. Anything that can be touched, measured, assigned a dollar value, that's real. Everything else is just fantasy. On the other hand, you have spiritual realities. The other worldview is spiritual realities. You have ideas, principles, feelings, experiences. They have real value. Material things are insignificant. And this is, according to the deeper level, this is the wrestling twins that goes on in a daily life within our lives. Right? You have two competing worldviews and approaches to life. And each one is striving to assert itself. Right? You have the worldview. Right? Material is real, then you have the spiritual reality, the Yaakov and the Esau. Now we're going to take it a step further. We get a little deeper based on this. On a deeper level, anybody who's with us for the Tanya class will know that we talk about the two souls within a human being, right? The duality within each one of us. We have the godly soul, the nefesh elokis, and the animal soul, which is the nefesh abahamis. And there's a constant, perpetual struggle that goes on between the animal soul and the selfish soul and the selfless soul, right? The animal soul is a source of our drives of self-fulfillment. The godly soul is striving to, escape the ego and the self-interest and be selfless, right? So according to this Hasidic interpretation, that those are the two conflicting kingdoms of Jacob and Esau that each one of us have within ourselves. Okay? Now, this is when we get to the meat of the lesson, because we're going to go deeper. We're going to get now into a real Kabbalistic idea. Some of you may have heard the words before, although I don't think we've ever haven't had a class on it. And we're going to look at the Yaakov Esau duality based on Zohar and real deep mystical teachings. Okay? And in order to do that, I want to introduce to you two words: tohu and tikkun. The translation of tohu, not tofu. Tohu literally means chaos. It's actually one of the first words in the Torah in the Bible. Right?
The world started.
In the beginning, the world was tohu vavohu. It was chaos. There was no order, basically. That's tohu. And then tikkun means literally rectification. We talk about tikkun olam, to rectify the world. Tikkun is rectification. So first I'll tell you the concept, then we'll explain it. But the concept is as follows: that first God created a tohu reality. God created a world that was a world of tohu. But that reality was not sustainable. So God created a world of tikkun, a rectification. And as a result, the world we are in now, the reality that we live in today, is a tikkun world. but it also includes elements from the Tohu world. Okay? You get it? No? That's fine.
Yes,
We're going to- what?
organized or controlled chaos.
That's right.
Organized or
It still
controlled
has a,
chaos. So we're going to learn the difference between chaos, tohu, and what causes the chaos, and rectification, the organized thing of the chaos, is what we'll learn what comes after. So what is tohu, what is tikkun? So let's see if I can share my screen here. There's a recap here. Here we go. So we have Esau and Yaakov. On the one hand, Esau is Rome, materialism, self-realization, the animalistic soul, and tohu. Jacob is Judea, which is fighting with Rome, spirituality, which is dueling with materialism, self-transcendence, which is dueling with self-realization, and tikkun, which is in conflict with tohu. Okay? Esau is Rome, quest for power, technology, entertainment. Judea is belief in God, morality, social justice. Okay, we did that. Esau represents matter. Jacob represents spirit. Esau is the animal soul, derived for self-fulfillment. Jacob is godly soul, escaping the confines of ego. Esau is tohu, and Jacob is tikkun, the world of chaos and the world of rectification. Okay, so now we're going to explain what that means. So let's try to explain it this way. We have here the light and the vessel. Everything in the world is made up of a light and a vessel. What do I mean by that? What's a light and what's a vessel?
one is real and one is, is not tangible.
Okay, good. So we have in text number four, page 86. And again, we're not gonna cover the entire Tohu Tikkun idea because it could take a whole course on this idea of Tohu Tikkun, but just enough to understand the concept to translate it and explain the story of Yaakov and Esau. So we are at page 86, text number 4. This is taken from the Mittler Rebbe, second Chabad Rebbe. To understand the root of the difference between Tohu and Tikkun and how Tikkun comes to rectify and refine Tohu, serving as form for a substance. As is known, the lights of Tohu were extremely powerful and intense, and there prevailed a state of abundant light and scant vessels. Because the vessels were unable to contain the light, they shattered and fell. Following that, the Tikkun reality was made with scant lights and abundant vessels, with the result that the lights are sustained within the vessels, which I'm sure doesn't make any more sense to you than what was said beforehand. What are these lights? What are these vessels? What's the idea of shattering of the vessels, the spheres like Kalim? Let's try to make some sense, and at least on a basic level, this reading, what's the idea of Tohu and Tikkun, lights and vessels. Okay? So the first thing we should understand is that every existence in the world requires lights and vessels. One can't exist without the other. Let's give an example. Let's give an example of a book. A book, what is the light of the book?
The substance, what it's trying to convey.
Right. It's the ideas of the book. What's the vessel?
The book.
The words, right? The ink, the words on the paper, that is the vessel, right?
It's transmitting.
Right. A book that has words but no ideas, not much of a book. It's a sheets of paper with blotches of ink on them. Ideas without words is not a book. You can't call it a book. So a book needs the ideas and the words. Same thing with a melody. A melody, you have the emotional part of the melody, and then you have the musical notes. You can have two people, you can have two cantors singing a kol nidre, and one is dry, and one makes you cry, right? It's not their voices so much as the soul, the light of the music. Somebody who is, if you ever see people singing, if people rating the singing, all these shows, whatever it is, What do they rate? Just a voice? Or they want to see soul? They want to see the light within the music. The same thing you have with, I'd say, relationships. Right? Relationship, what's the light of the relationship? The light is the love. What's the vessel? It's the way they interact with each other, right? The way they translate that love into actions, right? So if you have a love but no interaction, it's a fantasy. It's not a relationship. On the other hand, a relationship that is devoid of feeling and passion is also not much of a relationship. You can have somebody giving their spouse gifts and millions of dollars of gifts, but lack any feeling, any emotion, any love, affection. It's not a relationship that's going to last, right? It's a lot of vessel, but no light. On the other hand, you can have a relationship that's a lot of light and light and light and light, but it's not grounded. There's no vessel. There's no communication of that love in words, in action, in gifts, in the way one treats another. Again, it's gonna fizzle. It's too much light, no vessels. The light's gonna shatter. The vessel. I mean, it's not going to have any effect. Now, very important to know that the light. Again, remember the light is the ideas, the light within everything. The light is not happy about being put into a vessel, right? For example, take love, for example. We say in our prayers in Shabbos, what can we do? We can't express our love in words. No words can really express your true feeling of love. It's very confined. Any word you use is going to be confined. Even the word love itself is so limiting, right? Because you love your car, you love ice cream, you love story, and you love your spouse. I mean, that's not the same love. So you've just taken such a deep light, such a bright light, and you've confined it to a word, which is a tremendous confinement for the light. So light is not happy to be put into these vessels, so to speak, right? It feels confined and constricted, right? But without the vessels, it's nothing. On the other hand, vessels don't like being agitated by too much light, right? Constantly challenging their boundaries. But without the light, the vessels are just an empty shell. So the bottom line is every existence, especially when you talk about a complex functioning existence like a human being, it consists of both light and vessels. Right? Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of a vessel that cannot hold its light. It's a radical example, but let's say you have a cup, want to fill it with water. But you go outside, you see a fire truck passing by, you ask the firemen to hook up their hose to the fire hydrant, right? Open their hose, and you put your styrofoam cup in front of the hose. What's going to happen? It's going to burst. The cup won't have any water in it. Yeah, there's too much light. There's too much pressure and light for the vessel. The vessel is going to shatter, right? You have this throughout life. You can have too much light for a specific vessel. Now, the tohu model is a model of, tohu, remember, means chaos. The tohu model is abundant light. Everything has light and vessels. You have to have light and vessels. The question is, what's the ratio between these two elements, light and vessels? The tohu model is one of abundant light and very small vessels. That's chaos. That's somebody who's unpredictable. Somebody who's going to go think out of the box, just completely go crazy. That's tohu. Tikkun has small light and abundant vessels. Okay, so the idea is not that great, not that big, but there's a lot of vessels. It's such a, an example perhaps. Perhaps you can have an example with your spouse, but sometimes you have one spouse is tohu, one spouse is tikkun. The spouse that holds the steering wheel on the 10 o'clock and the 2 o'clock, right? And goes 65 in the 65 zone, doesn't go 66 because can't go 66. These are tikkun type of people. They're tikkun, they're in a box. They're living in a box and they're confined, right? Those who are going skydiving, they want to, and they don't understand the other side. They're just out of the box, think out of the box, something that's exciting, different. They're constantly trying to get out of themselves to have more light, and they don't like the containment of that light. They're always trying to go beyond themselves. That's called tohu. Okay? That's a sort of an example, a human example. Now, which one is more, which one would you recommend? Which one has more advantage? Well, the truth is the tohu model has advantages and disadvantages, and the tikkun model has advantages and disadvantages.
They complete each other.
They could complete each other.
Right proportion, with the right balance.
But you need there's no question everything has tohu and tikkun. But I'm talking about the side that's completely tohu against the side that's all the way on tikkun. The tremendous light or the tremendous vessels with smaller light. So if you have small light, tikkun, and abundant vessels, the advantage is everything operates smoothly. Right? You have a well-oiled machine. There's no conflict. Every component knows its place, and it's just everything goes fine. That's a tikkun reality is efficient, it's harmonious, it's productive. That's the advantage. The disadvantage is it's a static reality. Right? Excitement, right? Even though there is growth, it's a very measured, predictable growth. It doesn't go beyond itself, right? A tikkun reality never goes into overdrive, never challenges itself, never challenges the rule book, right? However, going back to the tohu, right, which is abundance of light and scant vessels, that means that there is way too much light for the vessels. The advantages is a tohu personality is a dynamic, passionate, ambitious, innovative individual, always striving to do more, overreaching their limits, trying to go beyond their limits. That's the advantage. What's the disadvantage? It's unstable. It lacks discipline. It lacks focus, right? And sometimes it can't get along with other people because it has to get out. It doesn't understand its spouse and wants to stay home and just, is comfortable under the blanket and watch television. It has to be out there. It has to constantly be challenged. That's one of the hazards of tohu. What happens with tohu, let's give an example of tohu, a marriage that has a lot of light and little vessels. You have a marriage that's full of love, it's in fire, right? But if it's too much, it's one of his spouses is always looking to go beyond. It may not have that supportive actions that is necessary for a marriage. And I can think of a few people who I've known over the years who had that type of personality, the complete tohu personality, which was very difficult for the spouse to live with that type of personality, where it's always trying to get out there and outdo themselves. Take a business, for example. A business that has tohu, it's weighing the side of tohu, is it has an amazing vision, but doesn't have a strategy. Doesn't have a CEO, or maybe that doesn't have a CFO, doesn't have a strategy, just basically a tremendous vision. What are the outcomes? It's going to collapse. A vision is not enough for a business, right? Or if you have a group of people, they formulate an ideology, a religion, right? But there's no rules and regulations. It's all tohu, it's all ideas. But what will this ideology look like a generation later? So there are two potential dangers of a tohu model, a chaos model, a lot of light versus small vessels. Number one, the whole thing can collapse because it doesn't have structure that holds it up. A marriage will fall apart, the business will go bankrupt, the ideology will fade away. It's just too much light. There's nothing grounding it. Even worse, it'll survive, but it becomes the opposite of what it was supposed to be. Right? The love in the marriage can turn into resentment. Talking about a business, it will squander all its resources. An ideology or religion will be hijacked to justify behavior that goes opposite its noble aims and becomes a force of evil instead of good. That's if there's an abundance of tohu, abundance of light, but there's not a lot of vessels to ground it. Okay, so let's summarize this. Tohu and tikkun are two models for existence. each with advantages and some very pronounced disadvantages or flaws. Now, if you were God, okay, very difficult to say, to think about it that way, but which world would you create? Would it be a tohu world, or would it be a tikkun world? A world that has a lot of light and little vessels, or one with a lot of vessels and little light? You may say, well, just make a balance of one world. But there's a reason why God actually created two worlds. As we learned in text 4, we read in text 4 here, that God first created a tohu world that had a lot of light, energy, but small vessels. Because the vessels weren't able to contain the light, like that styrofoam cup that can't contain that powerful flow of water from the fire hydrant, it shattered. They shattered and fell. And on that, God created the world of tikkun with small lights, small light and abundance of vessels. And that became an orderly, stable, harmonious world where energies don't shatter their vessels.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yeah.
How does this whole concept with the light and the vessels play into light in Judaism? Has always been, at least from what I've gathered in the last few years, a concept of elevating oneself. It's where we're at to elevate our existence right now to a higher spirituality. So how does that play into what you're talking about?
Okay, good question. So what's the essence of light in Judaism? So Chassidus talks about this. When it comes to even tohu and tikkun, or light and the opposite, or Yaakov and Esau, or all these type of things, the godly soul and the animalistic soul, the natural soul, we don't translate them as good and bad until they're actually activated and used in that manner. So light is the potential for good.
Right.
However, if not used properly, it can be abused. So there can be too much light. There can be a lot of light, but if it's not grounded in something, tangible, that light's just going to go nowhere. It's not going to have a positive effect. It may even have a negative effect. So light needs a vessel in order to. So look at electricity. Electricity. You turn on the light bulb. Electricity goes on. What's happening? What's the light? The light is the electricity coming into the light bulb. The light bulb is containing that electricity, because if it's too much electricity, the bulb is going to burst, right? So you have to have the right amount of electricity coming in that will allow that vessel, the light bulb, to produce the light. And so too, enlighten our lives. We need to ground the light. We need the light bulb. We need to sort of take that light that comes from above and translate it into actions and into some vessels in order for it to be a positive effect, in order to be the light that you're referring to.
So, another question?
Yeah.
How do the 613 commandments, do they come into play with this concept?
Yes, they definitely come to. I think we'll touch upon it soon. The idea of, we'll touch upon it soon. We'll talk about it soon when we get to the Yaakov and Esau, the advantage of having a duality of a tohu and tikkun, both worlds, which allows us to have the Torah. Just in short, the Torah are the vessels of the light that Hashem inserts in the Torah. So when you put on tefillin, for example, when you give charity, it's not that money, that dollar, that $10, that $1 million, that's really light. The light is the energy that Hashem flows into the mitzvah, that allows, when you do that action, when you translate that into a vessel. The vessel is the black boxes of tefillin, is the actual dollar bill. That's only a vessel. The light is the energy that Hashem places when He says, I want you to give charity, I want you to put on tefillin, I want you to keep Shabbos or keep kosher. That is the light. But the actual kosher food, the meat, that's the vessel. Okay? So Hashem wanted a world that would be able to tap into the advantages of both a tohu and a tikkun model. And therefore, first God created a tohu reality, a world of passion, of egos, of growing oneself. Then God created a tikkun reality, a stable, orderly world with a capacity of self-discipline and harmonious coexistence. As a result, we have access to both worlds. We could live in a tikkun, life of tikkun, at the same time draw from the forces of tohu. Okay? Which we'll discuss in a moment. You see in page 89 in your books, you have the questions. What are the tohu elements in our lives? And what are the tikkun elements in our life? You see exercise 3.1. Right? So in the Esau, let's go back to Esau, Jacob and Esau. Right? What does Esau represent? Esau is untamed. He's a hunter. He's out there. He's the world of passion. He doesn't have many constraints. Yaakov is sitting in a tent. Tent has boundaries. He's sitting in a tent. He's complete. He's content. He's whole. He's learning. He represents the orderly and disciplined world of tikkun. Right? If I ask you, who is more tohu, Yaakov or Esau? It would be Esau, right? Yaakov is more of a tikkun or a type of existence. In our own experience, if you look at the passion of the animal soul, which represents the human ego of never being satisfied, always ambitious, materialistic life, that's tohu elements in our lives. The orderliness, the harmony, the spirituality, the self-discipline of the godly soul, these are the tikkun elements in our life. Okay, so Esau is tohu, Jacob is tikkun. The animal soul is tohu, the godly soul is tikkun. It's more orderly. What came first?
Chaos.
Chaos.
Chaos, right? Chaos came first.
We still have.
Tohu came first, because and tohu is the more powerful force in our lives. Everywhere we look, we find this tohu world, right? Who are the most energetic, ambitious, successful people you know? Are they people working out of self-interest, or those committed to altruistic goals? Let me ask you a different way. What has produced the most impactful discoveries, inventions in the world that improved human life?
Tikkun.
What was it, a quest for power, fame, and wealth, or was it a desire to better the world?
Both.
The world.
Both.
It has an aspect of both, but I can tell you, look at today's world, you'll see that it's tohu. When Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, pharmaceutical companies, are they after a altruistic goal, or are they at it for the money, for the ambition, and to grow, to be wealthier, to get more money, and more? That's what drives the human being. That's what that's how we have all the technology we have today, is because of the tohu drive. It's not about making the world a better place. People don't invent stuff simply because they want. Some people do, but in a general sense, it's more of the self-interest, the ego, the you want to innovate, you want to go beyond yourself, thinking outside of the box. Thomas Edison, how many tries did he had till he finally discovered the light bulb? And it was a tremendous amount, right? He was tohu, he's going out of himself. So the tohu elements in our world are more powerful than the tikkun elements. Why?
Rabbi, how do we answer the question then that you posed? Why wasn't Yaakov born first?
Okay, so 1 second. I think you have the answer already.
I think you just gave it to us, yeah.
Right. Esau represents tohu and Yaakov represents tikkun. Right. We'll get to that soon. We'll answer the question soon.
So it sounds like all this ambition and innovations, self-realization, sounds like a negative thing. Why?
You're breaking up. Your voice is breaking up. Again,
okay,
ask the question.
My question is self-realization. It sounds like it's a negative
Oh, very good. So that will lead us.
thing. Why is that bad to have ambition
Maybe by
and,
itself.
and innovate and try harder.
So that, good. So that'll lead us to the question is, Tohu came first. Tohu is more powerful, but why? Tohu seems like it's in a lower level. I mean, what's greater, the animal soul or the godly soul? The self-ego or altruistic ideas? So there's a Kabbalistic rule of thumb. It goes as follows. I'll translate in English. The higher something is, the lower it falls. I mean, works
That's
the worst.
the animals have their, people have their head over higher than their body.
You take something, you drop it down from 10 feet, it'll make a little indentation in the ground. You drop it from 1,000 feet, it'll make it much deeper. It goes even lower, right? So the animal soul in the material world, as we know them, we call them lower. They're lowlier than the godly soul in the spiritual reality. But that's because they stem from a higher, an earlier link in the chain of creation. The world of Tohu is God's original creation. When I say original, I don't mean in time, because time is itself is a creation. I'm talking about in level. Tohu is original God's creation, making it more God's prime reality. The idea of small lights and abundant vessels. Tikkun only came afterwards. Okay? So when spirituality struggles to gain ground in a very materialistic world, it's battling the status quo, because that was there before already. Tohu was there. Right? So in our instincts for selflessness, commitment, peaceful coexistence, it has to contend with our ego, greed, and animalistic passions, right? With our nefesh habahamis, they face an uphill battle against an earlier, more primal self, the Tohu self. Okay? That's the way God created the world. And this answers the second question. As Tom mentioned, if Yaakov was destined to become the firstborn and the master, why wasn't he born first? Why create an upside down situation and then force Yaakov, Jacob, into a struggle to gain the top position? And the answer is that Esau and Yaakov embody the dual realities of Tohu and Tikkun. So the story of their lives mirror this cosmic sequence of creation. An earlier, powerful, chaotic world of Tohu, followed by a younger, gentler, more harmonious world of Tikkun. Okay? So that's why Yaakov is created after Esau. Okay. Now that we have that information, this is the tip of the iceberg of this idea of Tohu and Tikkun, chaos versus Tikkun. Now we'll understand the question, what are they fighting over? Why does there have to be a struggle between these two kingdoms?
They're they can't be conciliable. They're I can't, you know the one I'm talking about. Irreconcilable.
It's called
Unified.
in divorce it's called irreconcilable.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Doctor, doctor, you're welcome.
The two worlds cannot be unified, Rabbi?
What's that?
The two worlds cannot be unified.
Well, they can't be together in one, because one is scant lights and a lot of light and a lot of vessels. The other one has lots of vessels, kind of light. They can't be together. They're constantly contending with each other. Our animalistic soul and godly soul, our ego and selflessness are always contending one another. The ego can't live together with selflessness.
We fight it every day. We fight it every moment.
Right.
Yes.
But we could tap into our ego. While we're selfless, we could tap into the advantages of an ego. For example, I tell you, there was a chassid who, he says that he was a very selfless individual. Nothing was about himself. But he says, you know what? When the Yetzer Hara, when the evil inclination wants to try to get me to do a sin, what do I tell him? I said, you want me to do a sin? I am the disciple of this great Rebbe. How am I going to do a sin? He uses ego for the positive. Right? that can be used too. So I want to go now into explaining, based on this, the Isaac Rebekah, how they dwelt with their twin sons. As you recall...
Before we move on, just define, what's your definition of self-transcendence and self-actualization, realization? Again, what's the difference?
The difference is that that the tikkun world, the tohu world, you're always trying to go out of yourself. A tohu without a tikkun means that it's something that's slanted all the way to the side of tohu, has a lot of ideas, is constantly going out of themselves, but it's not grounded.
Okay.
On the other hand, a tikkun world is well grounded, but doesn't have the advantage of that great light, of that passion. Right? You can have a person who's very predictable. He'll go 35 miles an hour, will never go 36, even if he's rushing to the hospital, because he's a tikkun person. You know, a tikkun person, they tell a story about there was a Swiss guy, not to make fun of the Swiss, they're great people. I have two uncles who are Swiss, but he was, he always liked getting an aisle seat. He never considered any other seat but the aisle seat. And one day he comes back from a trip and he's distraught. And his friend asked him what happened. He says, "You'll never believe it. 6 months before the trip, I booked my ticket and I said I want an aisle seat. I called 3 months before to ensure I have an aisle seat. I came to the airport and I asked them they have an aisle seat. They said yes. I came on the plane and I had a window seat. I couldn't believe it." So his friend tells him, "So why didn't you just ask the person in the aisle seat to change?" He says, "The problem, I couldn't. There was nobody sitting in the aisle seat." Sometimes we're so stuck in this is the way it has to be. We have a lot of vessels, but there's not a lot of ideas, not a lot of light.
Yeah.
That's the tikkun.
Narrow-mindedness.
So what's a self-transcendence again?
Self-transcendence is you need both in order to really transcend you. But we'll soon talk about tapping into the energy of a tohu world, because we live in a tikkun world, and tapping into the tohu world. Okay, so for that,
Rabbi,
I want to.
But I'm sorry, excuse me, Rabbi, but you still don't want to use the word unification.
Yeah, you could use the word unification by taking the advantage of the tohu world. You can't live in both worlds at the same time, but you can take the advantages of the tohu world and incorporate it in the tikkun world. We'll soon see. So I'm going to continue now with the third part, the final part, and this is a fascinating questions, and see the wording. See if you can find some very interesting wording in this, the actual blessing of that Yaakov gives to. There we go. Okay, let's give these.
And it was, just as Jacob was going out from the presence of his father, that his brother Esau came from his hunt. And he said to his father, "My father should get up and eat of the game of his son, in order that your soul should bless me." And his father Isaac said to him, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am your firstborn son Esau." Isaac trembled an exceedingly great trembling, and he said, "Who then is the one who trapped game and brought it to me? And I ate of it all before you had come, and I blessed him. Also blessed shall he be." As Esau heard the words of his father, he cried an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and he said to his father, "Bless me too, my father." And he said, "Your brother came with cunning and took your blessing." And he said, "Is this why his name was called Jacob? Twice he has deceived me. He took my birthright, and here now he has taken my blessing." And he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Isaac answered and said to Esau, "Here I have placed him master to you, and all his brothers I have given to him as servants. And with grain and wine I have supported him. And for you, then, what shall I do, my son?" And Esau said to his father, "Have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me, also me, my father." And Esau raised his voice, and he wept. And his father Isaac answered, and he said to him, Here, the fat of the land will be your settlement, and of the dew of the heavens above. By your sword you will live, and your brother you will serve. And it will be that when you are aggrieved, you will cast off his yoke from upon your neck.
Rebekah finds out that Esau is so angry over having been cheated out of the blessings that he is plotting to kill Jacob. So she convinces Isaac that it is time for Jacob to travel to her hometown, Haran, to find a wife.
Isaac called Jacob, and he blessed him, and he instructed him, and he said to him, Arise, and go to Paddan Aram, and take yourself a wife from there, from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. And the Almighty God will bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, and you will become a community of peoples. And he will grant you the blessing of Abraham to you, and to your seed with you, to inherit you the land of your dwelling, which God has given to Abraham.
Okay.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why couldn't Jacob just reverse the blessing and just fix the problem? Because the wrong son got the blessing. I would think it could have been reversed, couldn't it?
You can't take back a blessing. You ever try to empty a toothpaste? Right? Not so hard to empty a toothpaste.
Yeah.
Try to put the toothpaste back into the bottle, into the tube. Can't do it.
I'll try it tomorrow.
In other words, you can't unring a bell.
That's the power of words. Power of words. Once the words come out of your mouth, once you are blessed, which is why we have to be so careful with our words. So once Yitzchak gives Yaakov the blessing, he knows this is it. But we'll soon explain something fascinating. When we read this story in Hebrew school or Bible study, whatever it is, sometimes we think that Isaac intended to, give Esau the blessing, the legacy of Avram, of Abraham, that God blessed Abraham with. And if Rivka wouldn't have intervened, the three patriarchs would have been Abraham, Isaac, and
Esau.
But if you examine the text that we just read, we find that's not what happened. I think Tom mentioned this earlier. That's not what happened at all. Okay? What's the first reaction of Isaac upon realizing that Jacob tricked him into getting the blessing? What did he say?
The hands of Esau, and the voices. So
that's before he blessed him. But
there's a missing thing. How come when he says that, what's their reaction to it? They see that he is onto something. He knows you can't change the voice. So why it's not telling us anything after that if he knew that much?
Okay, so let's develop this and see if you have the question soon. I think we're going to get to it. Okay, so Yaakov gets the blessing, and Esau comes back, and Isaac realizes he gave the blessing to Jacob. What does he do? He says, also blessed should he be, meaning Yaakov, Jacob. Esau starts crying and says, bless me, my father, bless me. You don't have another blessing. All you have is one blessing, father, right? And what does Isaac say? Sorry, I gave everything to Jacob. I gave him Tala Shemayim, Mishmani Aretz, the dew of the heavens, the fat of the land, mastery over his brother. Sorry, I have nothing for you. And Esau persists. If you look he says, you only have one blessing, father? Bless me also. Finally, Isaac relents, right? See, Jacob got already the dew of the heavens and the fat of the land. So Esau can also dwell under Jacob's rule. Okay, fine. Under certain conditions, Esau will be able to cast off the yoke of Jacob. But what happens next? Next, before Jacob is about to leave, Isaac summons him, right? And what does he say? If you look back into text 5, line 53, here it is, right? And the Almighty God will bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, and you will become a community of peoples. And he will grant you the blessings of Abraham to you and to your seed with you to inherit you the land of your dwelling, which God has given to Abraham. 1 second. Isaac just told Esau, I've got no more blessings for you. I'm out of blessings. And all of a sudden, Jacob comes back and he has a whole new blessing for him. The blessing of Abraham. The blessing of the land of Israel. It seems like Isaac did have another blessing reserved. So why did he tell Esau, sorry, I have no blessing for you?
He wanted Esau to be more appreciative. He wanted him to plead, and he wanted him to be more appreciative. He was trying to instill more love into Esau.
But Esau pleaded. He was crying. You feel the emotion. Esau is crying, my father, please.
And Isaac created that. He wanted that.
Right, but he still doesn't bless him. When he comes to him, he says, I have no more blessings. It seems like he saved the best blessing for last.
That's what I'm saying.
He doesn't give it to Esau. He tells Esau, I have no more blessing, but he's saving that for last. And this is the beautiful explanation. Isaac never intended to give Esau the blessing of Abraham. That was never his intention. If it was his intention, he could have given it to him right afterwards. He gave Jacob the blessing of the dew of the heavens and the fat of the land. He didn't mention anything about Abraham and the land of Israel.
Right.
Now Esau comes, so give Esau the blessing of Abraham. But he didn't. Okay? Why? So here's we bring the Tohu and Tikkun in. Isaac saw the real Esau. The Esau that embodies the world of Tohu, with all its potential powers. Okay? When it says that Yitzchak was blind, what the commentary says, Hasidus Kabbalah says, that he wasn't distracted by the external forms of things. Eyesight, you can see the external, you can't see the internal. He was blind, he didn't see the external, he didn't focus on the external, he saw the inside of Jacob and Esau. He saw Esau's materialism, he saw his animalistic passions, the fact that he was a man of the field, he was a cunning hunter. He saw them for their true purpose, that these passions, these resources should be directed in a positive and a godly direction. He also knew the nature of his younger son, of his son Yaakov, Jacob. He knew that Jacob embodied the world of Tikkun, right? Selflessness and a godly soul. So this was Isaac's plan. Here, listen, this is what Chassidus says. Beautiful. Isaac's plan was as follows. Give each of the brothers the resources to fulfill their role. Esau, who embodies the Tohu world, should be given the political power, the blessings of material abundance. Jacob, Yaakov, who possesses the strength of spirituality, of tikkun, should be given the spiritual blessings. Okay? So he had a plan. They're both going to get a blessing. But Jacob will get the blessing of Abraham, and Esau will get the blessing of materialism, because he had that passion. So this will answer our fourth question. Why do we find so much in this story that Isaac wanted food? You know, there's a hunting game, delicious food. What was Isaac? He was hungry. He was a materialistic person. Esau has to first bring him food before he gets the blessing. And Rivka tells Jacob, "You give him food." What's this about food? How is the steak involved in all these blessing stories? Why is it so important the Torah to tell us? And the answer is, it's precisely because Esau was a talented hunter in the field of materialism that convinced Isaac that Esau was equipped to transform these resources, this materialism, these delicious foods, and into a pleasure, a pleasant aroma for Hashem. Right? And it was only after Jacob, Yaakov, his mother Rivka, knew, was able to produce such physically satisfying aroma, delicious food for Jacob, that Jacob blessed him. Right?
I was just looking at text 6, Rabbi, because the question that I had when the blessing that Isaac gave is a pretty powerful blessing, and it also seemed like it would exceed the authority of a father in terms of passing on a blessing, that these were elements that only God could grant. And so I was wondering, under what authority did God, I didn't see it, but as I'm reading in text 6, the Torah, I guess in there, God did give Isaac the ability to be able to pass on the element and the blessing of Abraham to his offspring. But because, I mean, that just struck me that he really stepped out there. but he wasn't out there by himself. God had
because God promised Abraham that his children, specifically Isaac, will continue the legacy of Abraham,
okay,
the father of the nations, and the blessings of Israel would have to go through Isaac's children.
Yeah.
So now Isaac is choosing which child gets that blessing.
Well, that's the interesting part.
Yeah. So what does Isaac think? What does Isaac say? He says, I have two blessings here. I have blessing of materialism and blessing of the Abraham blessing, the spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Since Esau is a man of the field, he's a hunter, he deals with the materialistic world, he has a passion, he has a tohu. Let me give him the blessing to be a master over the world. That's his, that's his forte. He'll be able to elevate the material world. Jacob, who's a man of the tent and he's studying Torah, he'll get the spiritual blessings of Abraham. Okay? Now, if Isaac would have ended up granting Esau the first set of blessings, our mission in life would have turned out very differently. It wouldn't be the same, right? It's not that Esau would have been granted the spiritual mission of Israel. That role anyways would have be given to Jacob. The intention was to give that to Jacob. But what would have happened is that the material world and the spiritual world would have remained two completely separate realms, two separate entities, each one entrusted to another one of the brothers. Neither world would have power over another. Look at text 6, as I mentioned before. Jacob is the realm of holiness. Without all of this, he still would have had received all the supernal energies. But the first set of blessings granted him an increase of powers from the highest levels to obtain much grain and wine, referring to the laws and stories of the Torah that become embodied in material garments and the actions of the mitzvot. However, had Jacob not received these blessings, the power of Torah would have extended only to spiritual realm. So what would happen is, if Yaakov wouldn't have received those first set of blessings, the Torah would have no influence on the material world. The material world would be in the hands of Esau. The spiritual world would be in the hand of Jacob. And that's the way it would have been. It's only because Jacob received Esau's blessing of materialism that the Torah is able to have a powerful effect on materialism. Okay? So take, for example, what would happen as follows. So what happens here? Isaac wants to give a blessing to Esau. What kind of blessing? The material blessing. Yaakov comes in, fools his father, and gets the material blessing. Now Isaac's in a bind. He has no more blessings for Esau. He's not going to give him the spiritual blessing, the blessing of Abraham, the blessing of the land of Israel. No. He knows that it has to go to Abraham, that's to go to Jacob. But Jacob just took the blessing of Esau. So I'm sorry, Esau, I got nothing for you. Of course, he had another blessing, but he couldn't give that blessing to Esau. He knew that. That blessing had to be for Jacob. Now, Rebecca, the wise woman, the Yiddish mama, she wasn't happy with Isaac's plan of giving the materialism to Esau and the spirituality to Yaakov. Rivka realizes that this is indeed a beautiful vision in a perfect world. That means in a world that's free of evil, or where there's boundaries between good and evil, and they're pretty clearly, there's a line between, like in the Garden of Eden before Adam and Eve, that would have worked. You give Esau he has the material passion, given the material blessing, and Jacob has the spiritual, is tuned to spirituality, given the spiritual blessing. But in our present, post-garden world, the plan can't work. It doesn't work. Because in the post-garden world, A material world that is ruled by materialists will never rise up to its purpose. It'll just end up being a corrupt world. Rivka saw this, where her own son Esau, she knew where he was heading in life. And she realized that if he received the blessing of materialism, it would just end up in a spiral, and it would, and Jacob would have no effect on materialism. So what does she do? She says, Jacob, you need that blessing of materialism because you are a man of Torah. You're a man of tikkun. And you, through Torah, through tikkun, can have an effect on the material world. So while Isaac says, Isaac's ideology was almost like, if something is tohu, let's say a business is failing because it's a tohu business. It has a lot of light and little vessels. So you can throw money into that business, it's going to all fail. It's not going to help. By putting more tohu into a business, it's not going to help. It won't solve the problem. You'll just eat up that money. So Rivka contrived a plan to have Yaakov obtain mastery over the material world. She dressed Yaakov in Esau's clothes to show that he can deal with and relate to materialism, right? And he can play that role. And this way, he would receive the material blessing. Now, I know this is Kabbalistic, and this we learned a very deep concept of Tohu and Tikkun, but I think we brought it beautifully into the story of Jacob and Esau. Now let's translate that into ourselves. The Yaakov and Esau story is not just a story in the Bible and a story of the Torah that happened thousands of years ago, and it's a beautiful, sibling rivalry, etc. But we uncover the story within the story. We discover this is the story of our lives. We all have a Yaakov, we all have an Esau in us. They're all trying to be master over one another. And we're represented with two different approaches to the struggle. There's the Isaac, the Yitzchak approach, and there's Rivka approach. Okay, so we have the Tohu personality, which is material life, the Esau, striving for self-fulfillment, it's sort of passion, ambitions. And we have the Tikkun personality, which is a spiritual life, the yearning for stability and discipline, self-restraint, selflessness, right? Goals. The Torah represents us with a difference with Yitzchak and Rivka's ideas, because they're both necessary. Like Yitzchak, like Isaac, we have to recognize the value of tohu, of unleashing the passion, even sometimes our ego, of recognizing our greatness. And like Rivka, we have to understand, in order to properly utilize our potential and harness our ego, we have to place our Tikkun personality firmly. It has to be in control. The Torah, which is the Tikkun personality, has to be in complete control. When it is, then the Tohu can find its place.
Wow.
That gets to Herman's questions about the 613 mitzvah.
Right. So the mitzvahs represent the idea of tikkun. The mitzvahs were given, it says, to rectify the world. So that's a matter of tikkun. It has a lot of vessels. And every halacha, every Jewish custom and law has the size, the time, the how to, how don't, etc., etc. It's tikkun, right? But in order to fulfill the Torah properly, you also need the passion of tohu. And you need the passion for materialism. It's very interesting. Judaism takes a very interesting approach here. In order to strengthen our spirituality, we need a passion for materialism. Somebody who has no care for money, no desire for anything materialistic, won't be able to fulfill their true potential in this world, their spiritual potential in this world.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the question is, based upon this story, which is really just fascinating, it's really the essence of where we as Jews in the the entire world is going, and that is to find this, whatever balance there is between these two concepts. And that is when the Mashiach will appear.
Yeah. The ultimate balance will be.
That is the really ultimate concept in having the Mashiach come.
Right. 100%. When Mashiach comes, you will be able to see within the materialism of the world the passion of the Torah. You see, you'll be able to use both and today, as we're working towards the day of Mashiach, we have to sort of get a taste of that. Okay? So every time we interact with the material world, we reenact the drama of the stolen blessings. We become a Yaakov who dresses in the clothes of Esau to obtain the dew from the heavens and the fat of the land, right? In essence, we are spiritual beings. We're created in God's image who desire a spiritual life. We have a godly soul, right? It comes from the world of Tikkun, our godly soul. And that's our truest self. But our task in the world requires us to pursue material success and even to be passionate about it if we wanted the passion of Esau. It's almost like a catch-22. Right? We face this catch-22 in our lives. To do good, right? We need to succeed in our interactions with the physical, the gashtis, material world. In order to succeed, we have to immerse ourselves in the world and even care about material success. But of course, we're supposed to care about loftier things more than money and material achievements.
Rabbi,
so we have to dress ourselves in Esau's clothing. Rivka says, put on Esau's clothing, receive the blessings of the dew in order to have effect of the Torah mitzvahs on it. Right? But who are we essentially? We are spiritual beings. But we have to, Judaism tells us to have a passion. Sometimes we look at money as bad. We look at people who crave money as bad, as negative. No. If they don't do what's proper with it, yes, then they're squandering their potential. But there was once a great Rebbe, who's one of his Hasidim, I say this story many times, but one of the Hasidim says, the Rabbi, I stopped eating good fish and expensive foods and wearing expensive clothing. I'm just eating black bread, hard bread, and water. And his teacher, his Rebbe, said, no. Go back to your expensive fish. Go back to your luxuries. And I said, why? I'm serving God. And the Rebbe says, if you eat black bread and just water and rotten fish, when a poor person comes to your house, what are you going to give them? Yeah. You'll give them what you eat. The idea is we should enjoy the materialism. We should pursue materialism with the passion of Esau, but recognize that we're doing it in order to really unleash our soul, for our soul to be on fire, to really fulfill our potential, our purpose in the world. God could have left us in heaven. Our souls were doing just fine up there. Didn't ask to come down. But God said, this soul has to come in this world because you have to take the world passionately, take all the resources there is in the world and elevate it and make it spiritual. And that's our mission. That's our role. As long as we have in this world, let's continue to do mitzvahs, continue to use our resources for positive, to make the world around us a better place, to combine the passion of Tohu with the order and law and the guidance of Tikkun, of the Torah, and as Herman said, to bring Mashiach speedily in our days. Amen.
Amen.
And this is the nature, Rabbi, this is the nature of free will, right? To make that determination daily, constantly, how to incorporate both worlds.
Correct. For that we need,
There's a pastor in Dallas, Texas. You may have heard of him. His name's T.D. Jakes. And he says half of his brain is Mother Teresa, the other half is Bill Gates. And you could probably look at that as, part of the token. So every time Mother would come up with an idea, a charitable thing to do, Bill would say, Mother, that takes money. So going to your point, that for us to engage in charitable activities, we have to have materialism to be able to do that.
100%.
And the war, the battle, is in our brain between those two aspects. And
yeah, 100%. So
This is an incredible story, Rabbi.
yes.
It really is it's almost like the essence of where we are as Jews and as people in the world. It's like the core. Really, this story is like the core of where we are going.
Yeah, 100%.
It's funny, all the parables that you state, all the rabbis are always poor, and it's all there's never any rich ones. It's the people around them.
We don't know that,
and they have to teach a lesson to the rich ones to give charity. I
tried to change that trend, but it didn't work. But the truth is, there were many great rabbis. For example, the author of the Mishnah, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, was a very wealthy man, and he was with a lot of great rabbis who were. Most rabbis of the Talmud weren't rabbis, and none of them, I think, were rabbis as profession. There wasn't a profession of rabbi. All the great Tanoim, the Tanaic sages, they had jobs. One of them is called Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler. Rabbi Yochanan was a sandler. He dealt with sandals, with shoes. Hillel, the great Hillel the elder, he was a wood shopper. He would sell wood. I mean, they all had jobs. Yeah, you're right. Most of them, when you focus a lot is on the light, on the Torah study, then it's going to affect your business a bit. But there were some great rabbis in Tanaim and Amirayim. The Rebbe actually really focused on this, really encouraged people and blessed them with material wealth. He felt that this is the way today to make the world a better place.
Provided they use that money for mitzvahs.
100%. The Rebbe believed in people. So when he blessed them, he believed in them that they would do what's right with their possessions. I'm just going to conclude. I have a flight to New York in 2 hours, so I'm going to leave now. I'm going to the Rebbe's oil. I'm going to be there just for a few hours in New York. I'm going to a special visit to the Rebbe's resting place. And I'll be mentioning everyone here for health, for wealth, and for good fortune and all blessings in our lives. So,
thank you, Rabbi. Safe travels.
Have a safe trip.
Thank you very much. And if you have anything in particular you'd like for me to mention, you can always text me. I'll be there tomorrow morning. All the best.
When are you coming back?
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night?
We'll see you.
Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah,